Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Shivang, and this is a place where you can expect to find content geared towards living a life that is intentional, fulfilling, and meaningful. What you will not find here is content promoting go, 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 hustle culture, and purposeless productivity. And with that, let's get into it. It happened very often in the past where I would often find myself saying, I just don't have time for this. And it honestly really just felt like that each time. It truly felt out of my control. And yet somehow I did have the time to finish all of Schitt's Creek, all of Shameless, and all of Queer as Folk. All these shows, by the way, are very, very long, many episodes, and each episode takes a significant amount of time. The issue wasn't necessarily that I didn't have the time, but I didn't know where the time sucks were. And I didn't know how to prioritize things that were really meaningful to me. Whenever I thought about doing something for myself, it still felt like I would be doing, working, and it would kind of feel like a chore. And I just felt like, after a long day of work, I deserved to just be a passive receptacle of content. I really thought that the opposite of doing work was not doing anything, just kind of being passive and watching content and things like that and sinking into my couch. When in fact, I've realized now that the opposite of doing work that ends up making you feel tired or exhausted at the end of the day is doing stuff that actually makes you more creative and things that you're actually particularly passionate about. So Todd Henry in the book The Accidental Creative says, "The phrase 'I don't have time' really means there are things that are easier, less threatening, more comfortable that I'd rather spend my time on. And if that's the case," he says, "I won't argue with you, but you need to be honest with yourself about the fact that doing your best work may not be a priority at this time in your life." I really wish somebody would have given me this reality check a couple years ago. If you're watching this video and there's something you've been meaning to do but you just feel like you don't have the time for it, then let me let you in on a secret. You do have the time. You have at least some time, enough time to take that first or half of a first step. The major unlock, I think, for me was that it wasn't necessarily that I didn't have the time, but I wasn't prioritizing things in my life correctly. When I frame the problem as I'm not prioritizing what's important to me, I think of the answer of how can I prioritize this thing better. The problem with saying I don't have the time is that we kind of essentially make it a problem with our circumstances that we just don't have any control over. We end up dismissing the thing we really want to do as a pipe dream, and we completely take ourselves out of the equation. All responsibility ends up falling on the circumstances, which again won't change unless we do something about it. Now, of course, I'm not saying that we aren't all living in a day and age where we're all working a lot more than probably any of us truly needs to. If you've seen my videos on the concept of price, on unconditional happiness, and unrelenting productivity, you know my take on this. We're living in a world in which we are constantly influenced to want more things than we need, where the price of items are completely decoupled from their true value, and then we work hard to pay for these things that are completely mispriced. In fact, it's a shame that today in this day and age, with all the technological advances where we're producing more than we ever have before, but not only are we living in a world where there's no scarcity, but in fact there is surplus, more than enough for all of us, that not only are we not working less, we're actually working more, or even if it's staying constant, that itself is a tragedy. And then some of us even wear this as a badge of honor. All of that said and done though, while we don't all have universal basic income yet, and we still very much do have to produce goods and services for economic security rather than the value of the actual good or service, we still do have time to do the things we want to do if we choose to be intentional about it. So quick story. It's July 2017 and I just graduated from Dartmouth and I moved to Washington, DC for work. The first year was absolutely a year of extremes. I was working 60 hours a week on average, so I would go to work at 8 a.m., come back at 9 or 10 p.m. every day, Mondays through Thursday, and then Fridays I would try and come home by 6 or 7 p.m. To balance out all of this hard work, I would then spend my weekends partying and living it up with all of my friends. We would go out at like 10 or 11 p.m. and come back home at 2, 3, 4 in the morning some days. Then I would sleep in, wake up at 1 p.m., put some concealer on, go for brunch at 2 p.m., drink, come back home for a disco nap, wake up again, go party, come back, rest, prepare for Monday, and the whole week would start over. All my weekdays and weekends would just become this huge blur of action and reaction. In between though, whenever I would kind of get in the shower, I would suddenly have this influx of ideas just seep into my mind out of seemingly nowhere. The idea of having a YouTube channel, the idea of maybe having an app one day or writing a book. But of course, as soon as I would get out of the shower, I'd pick up my phone, I'd just be like, yep, those are all dreams and things I want to do at some point, but I just don't have the time for it. It's not like I can just work less, and I'm not gonna sacrifice my weekends, which I really used to treat myself after 5 days of so much hard work. But the reality was that I had basically prioritized and routinized work and the subsequent release over everything else. Looking back, there were many days I probably could have signed off of work at 6:30 p.m. I mean, truthfully, very little happens between the hours of 6:30 and 9 or 10 p.m. Anything that happens in those 2 to 3 hours can be done in half an hour or an hour the morning of the next day. And even if I had to come back home at 9 p.m. on one of those days, I could have still taken the time to write something for 45 minutes before I went to bed or before I put something on TV. The reason I never did any of this though, writing a book or developing an app or making a YouTube channel or any of this, was because I honestly always felt that doing these things would also feel more like work, and I didn't want to do any more of that. I didn't realize it would actually be so energizing and didn't even want to give it a try. Looking back, I also found that basically any pockets of time I had, I would just spend on my phone, on social media, all of this sort of intermittent technology usage. I had basically forgotten just how to be, how to focus, how to be creative. There was just no time for play and creativity. And that's when it clicked that this is why I would have all of my ideas in the shower, because the shower is the one time I wasn't working, I wasn't being called on by friends, I didn't have my phone, and that's only because the case isn't waterproof. The one time I had to just be by myself is when all of the ideas would just come rushing in. And then when the pandemic hit and everything kind of went on pause and people became more humane with their expectations of each other, and there were no more parties or events for me to go to, suddenly I had all this time and space open up, and all these creative things that I wanted to do suddenly became real things I could do, that I did have the time for. Having experienced this free time, I realized it's something really worth protecting because it makes me so happy, having time to just be creative and just to play. It has led me to employ a lot more self-discipline, whether it's knowing when to sign off at work, prioritizing meaningful social interactions with my friends rather than really shallow interactions on social media, and generally just limiting a lot of passive media consumption from which I don't get any new generative ideas. In doing so, I've kind of uncovered, or even, I guess, prioritized these large blocks of intentional time that I can really use to prioritize whatever's most meaningful to me. I've realized that if something is truly important to me, or even if I think that something could be really important to me, if I just give it a shot, I have to make time for it. As I said, we don't live in a world where we have universal basic income yet, and I haven't won the lottery and I can't just live off of the interest. So the reality of many of our lives is that we do have to make these time trade-offs. If you really feel like we don't have time for something, or we aren't making time for something, I think it really means one of three things in most situations. One, we don't actually value this thing as much enough to prioritize it over a lot of other things. Two, we don't value our own time enough and don't know how to advocate for it and be efficient with other tasks. And three, we don't actually realize what things are silently sucking up all of our time, like parasites. And we also don't know then how to get rid of them. If you're watching this video and you watched it this far, then you do have the time. At least you have enough time for the length of this video. Instead of saying I don't have the time for something, I now say I didn't prioritize this one thing today. And that's allowing me to take back control. Alright, well, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you got something cool out of it. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up because that's super encouraging to me. If you think somebody could get value from this video, then share this video with them. And if you like this content and want some more, then hit the subscribe button so you'll know when my next video is out. Until then, I'll see you all next time.